Getting our catcher games to reset can sometimes be a little bit tricky, and there's a few things that we need to keep in mind as we do that. As we play the game and look at what's going on with the game. Now, this game intentionally has some flaws within the code so that we can figure out what we need to do to get it working. But what I do have going on is if I win the game or lose the game, then when I press the mouse, it calls reset game. Now in this particular iteration of the project, forgot to uncomment or to recomment that line. There is no buttons, it's just click anywhere on screen because I neglected to save the code from the previous session where I had it coded for clicking on specific buttons. So we can put that in if it really matters. But in this case with the drop game, it's a little less critical when I do it. So if I click here, the timer is falling or going down in numbers. I can catch some drops. And I lost because I ran out of time. I have to catch 25 drops, but it only drops 1 drop per second, and the timer only runs for 5 seconds. So as you can see, there's no possible way to win this particular game. But I'll click to play again. Time started over. My score is 0. Oh wait, there a few drops are falling, but if you notice, it took a while for the drops to start. I'm waiting. Oh, there's one. And now this time if I wait, I don't think there will be any drops that will show up before we run out of time, and that's how it's going to keep going. Because what has happened is when I catch the drops are caught. Now if I modify the drops a little bit, and when they are caught, I don't put them off screen, but instead I am going to put them at 0. So I will send them to 0. So they'll be up at the top, out of the way, but they're not completely gone, so we can see what's happening. So what's happening is I catch a drop, 3, 4, 5. Okay, got a few drops there. Now we're waiting, and we can see those initial drops that I caught before. They're not resetting because once they've been caught, they're caught. And by allowing them to be on screen here, it should become evident that the problem that's happening with the drops is when my game is resetting, my drops aren't properly resetting their speed. Because if we look at a drop, when it's caught, it sets its speed y equal to 0. But we've never told the drop to reset its speed y, so now they're showing up with a speed y of 0. So when they appear, they're appearing at the top of the screen. So no matter what I do, I can't catch any new drops because the initial drops in my array all have a speed y of 0. So the problem is my drops have not reset themselves. So when I call reset game, and I reset my score, I reset active drops so then it can start from the beginning of the list, reset my time left value so my countdown timer will work, I tell both timers to start playing, set my game state, but the drops themselves have never been told to reset. And that was my crucial mistake. And by modifying their caught behavior so we can see the drops, it becomes obvious what has been missing. So we realize that the drops need to reset their speed. If I go into the drops were stubbed out with a reset method, the same way they had their update, they had a display, they had caught, and they also had reset. It didn't have any information in it when we began it in class. But what I know is I want my drops to start out at a new X position, so there's no way that anyone would go, oh, that's the same drop. When I replay the game, it's the same ones falling in the same order. So I want it to be random each time. We'll start them off screen, and then we reset their speed y. So in effect, what we're doing, if I look in my drop constructor up at the beginning, is I'm taking the three primary values of that drop, their location, x and y, and their speed, and resetting those values. So that's what's happening in the reset method inside my drop class. What's left for me to do is to then tell all of those drops to call their reset method. So this is where we use a for statement, and I is equal to 0. I is less than my number of drops. And then I will go up by 1. So inside there, we need to tell our drops array, drops I dot reset. And that will cycle through all of the drops and tell all of the drops to reset themselves. And by doing this, we've now reset the drops, we've reset our timers, reset the time left, reset the active drops, reset the score. So all of the things that need resetting as part of our project have now been updated. So now if I replay the game, the drops are going to, when they're caught, will park on screen. So we can see that. And we'll see that happen. So we can see them parking up there. But then when I reset the game, they're off screen and it starts all over again. So now we have a proper reset. So within this version, this example of resetting the game, I've taken advantage of referencing a function or a method because both win and lose need the same thing to happen, which is to reset all these parameters and change my game state. I could put those inside those functions, but then I would be repeating myself, and that's considered bad form. To add in increased interest on the gameplay, one of the things that I want to do is add in the ability to have levels. So within my game, I want every time I play that there would be an increase in the level of my gameplay. That means I need to keep track of the level. So inside my main code document, I need to add in a variable to represent my game level. Now, even though computers generally start counting at 0, most people, when they play a game, they think of their initial, that you start out at level 1. So we may want to start out game level at 1, but we can work with it and decide how we want to progress as it goes. So game level is equal to 1. So if we start out game level is equal to 1, I want to set up my game so that it tells the player what level they are currently on, so they have some sense of achievement. Then I want to, so as I'm showing that, I also want every time they win, I want my game level to go up. But every time they lose, I want the game level to reset itself. So we're going to see that this will require us to do a little bit of modification to our reset game, because now we're making a distinction on our levels that we have, because we're doing two separate things during our resetting of the game. So if I move down past play and move into win and lose, so if I win the game, we want my game level to go up by 1. If I lose the game, I want my game level to be equal to 0. So we're doing things a little bit different between those. Oh no, not 0, sorry. 1. Game level, reset it back to 1. So that's in my win and lose, that I make my game level go up or I reset it back to 1. I want to now show my level on screen. And I'm just going to grab a bunch of code that I already have. Game level. So I've set my string storing that. We can keep it in the same red as everything else, same size as the other user interface text at the top, but this time we will push it a little bit further down. So if we go down to say 75, not 750. So if we're at 75, that should put it on screen. If we run it, adding the game level into our project allows us to track how many times the user has played, but it also makes it more interesting because we can up the ante each time. We can change the size of the player, the size of the enemy. We can change the speed of interaction. We can change the necessary score threshold that the user has to accomplish. All of these things add to improving the challenge within the gameplay to hopefully make it a more interesting experience. To do that, we need to have an integer that will be our game level that we'll be using as our little magic number that we keep track of so that we can change the level of the game. And I think it's useful to not just call it level, but call it game level because it makes it a little easier to know what is happening. Now, my game level, I need to give it a value, and I'll say game level. And we'll start it out at 1. And the reason that I'm beginning at 1 instead of 0, normally we start counting from 0, is most of the time users expect that they're on the first level of a game, not the 0 level of a game. So it wouldn't make conceptual sense. And we could do some math trickery in the background so we're using 0, but they're using 1, but it'll be easier if we just start out with 1 in this instance. Now, as we move through what we have, if I go into play game, if I go into play game, one of the things I want to do is I want to display my game level on screen. I'm going to go grab some existing code for my text, and this time I will say game level. So I've set my string. I like to use this string to keep track of my text that I'm putting inside my text command. It's easier than putting all of that highlighted text inside here because often we will have longer text and then that starts to get a little bit ugly. We need to push this down a little bit on screen so it's not on top of the time left. So now I have my game level showing up on screen. If I run it, we'll see there's game level, but my game level doesn't increase or change or do anything yet. That will happen in win and lose. So inside win game, if I press the mouse, I up the game level. If I lose the game, I make game level go back to 1. I don't just take 1 away, but I reset to the beginning. So the player can keep winning until they lose. Once they lose, they're back at the beginning level. And conceptually, that makes sense for most gameplay. Now, if I run this, I'll catch a few drops. And I wasn't able to catch enough before I lost because my winning requirement is I have to catch all of the drops. And I have 25 drops falling. I have 5 seconds in which to do it, but the drops are falling approximately every half second. So in 5 seconds, I have the capacity to catch 10 drops maximum. That's not 25, so I can never win this game. But it would kind of make sense to modify this, and instead of saying my number of drops, let's say I have to catch 3 to win. Then I can win if I run the game. And this will allow me to play a few times. I won. My game level is at 2. I won again. My game level is at 3. Wait, I can just keep winning because all it takes is 3 every level to win. There's no increase in challenge. That's not that exciting. But if we up the ante and say each time to win I have to get a score equal to 3 times my game level, now we're getting somewhere. Now it's requiring the user to have to play a little bit better each time. And now I don't think enough drops should be falling unless I cheat and go up to the top where I can get the unlimited score by sitting on top of the drops. But now game level's 1, so I can win again. If I go up there, I can just keep winning once I've caught 1. And that's cheating. We don't want to go there. Now the score nukes itself every time we call reset game. Instead of doing that here, I'll just comment it out. If I go into lose game, when I lose the game, that is where I want to nuke my score. But when I win the game, I just want my level to go up and then reset everything else. So instead of resetting the score here, we only reset the score when we lose. So if I play, I won, and now my score was 3, and now my score goes up. But we'll see that we've now created another problem because we're keeping track of a score that it now only takes 3 to win each and every time. Now I have broken my game that it only takes 3 to win every level. So every level, if I get 3, my score is going up, but I only now need 3 every level to win. That's not that exciting. Boring. But if I say that I need to get a number greater than my current score, this is going to get us really close, but not quite. Because now it's created an impossible thing. So what we may need to be doing is keeping track of our previous score and storing that information, because now this is going to create a really interesting loop. Because to win, it's going to be near impossible because we've created a number that we can never get to. Because if score is going up every time I catch it, it's not going to work. So what we do need to do is to keep track of our previous score or our old score, which was a recommended suggestion. So we need an int of our previous score. And our previous score is going to be equal to, in the beginning it will be 0, but what we're really doing is setting previous scores equal to score. And since we will recycle that line, I'll just copy it because we'll be using it later. If I wander down through my code, when we're checking to see if we've won, So if score is greater than previous score plus 3 plus the game level. Now, previous score is simply going to be equal to score when I reset the game. So if my score was 3, now previous score is 3. That makes it 3 plus 3 times my game level. And then when it's 6 plus 3 times the game level, so that means I would have to get 12. So now we're starting to see a doubling action going on, and some serious increase in the challenge, which will render the game very difficult to win now that I'm on my 3rd iteration, because I will consistently run out of time unless I cheat. We don't want to go there. So this is one way that we can do it, though we may need the available time per level to increase, and we could increase the amount of time per level by a factor of the game level if you wanted to include that. Now if I want this to play longer, what we can do is set a longer timer. So then we can play more levels before the timer becomes the guaranteed losing factor. Can also make the game a little bit harder by realizing that the speed for the drops, we could tie that to game level. It will be more apparent if our drops are a consistent speed instead of a random speed. So now if I set my speed of my drops equal to, say, we'll start out at 2. But when a drop resets itself, instead of setting it equal to a random amount, then we can go 2 times game level. So if we increase the speed of the drop by the game level, we'll see a fairly dramatic increase in our game. 1, 2, 3. Okay, faster. Now we can say, whoa, okay, now that's getting a lot more stressful. And now I'm back to the beginning because I lost. I'll do some cheats on here so we can see them starting to go really fast. Now the game becomes almost impossible if we've actually gotten to a high enough score. So when we're doing this, how we go about building in levels, how we go about winning and losing, how we go about modifying it. I could now modify my catcher object so that the size of it is affected by the game level. Maybe it gets bigger because objects are going super fast, or maybe my player, the catcher object, is getting smaller, making the game harder. So we make it, and if you make those distinctions subtle or big and obvious, it will have a big impact on how people will be able to play in your game. And that's what you have to figure out based on your artwork, your movement speeds and style, your overall concept. What makes sense as a movement style, as a leveling up within the game, and how you want to choose to include it. When you are adding the images to your project, you need to make them sized to your code. So 600 by 400, if that is the size of your game, then you will create a new document and you will make it in pixels 600, 400, and 72 pixels per inch. For the background documents that you're making, you can choose a background of white or black or background color, doesn't really matter, and you will populate that with whatever background that you're putting in. So if there is some sky up there and then there's some water on the bottom, you will put that content in your document. You will save out, you will make one for each game state. You need a background for each game state. for your items. So for my catcher is radius of 16, so it is 32 by 32 pixels in size. So in Photoshop, I will choose File, New, enter in 32, enter in 32, 72, and transparent. Your sprites, we want transparent backgrounds so that when we bring them into processing, everything isn't just a big ugly box. So then I will make a transparent background. As you can see, that's not very big. You can zoom in on it while you are working, and then you can draw or paint whatever makes you happy. Now you could choose the pencil and work with the pencil tool so that you're painting individual pixels. So you could do pixel art. I'm going to ask for you to make your own artwork for this project. Don't rely on other people. There are plenty of repositories of free artwork out there, and we will look at some of those on some other activities. But for right now, make your artwork. So if this is my catcher, we can do pixel artwork, and if I zoom to 100%, you can see that is what it would look like if I brought it into processing and put it onto my background. That's how big it is. It's not very big. Oh, no, that's one too small. That's how big it is. So when it says 100%, that's the size it's going to be on screen inside your game. When you are making artwork for your drops, again, pay attention to how big are they. If you set a radius of 8, that means it's 16 by 16. If you decide that you can't make artwork that small and you need or want to make it bigger, that's okay. It can be bigger. Just know that we need to set this 8 value equal to half of the width of the object. For the purposes of this project, please keep your artwork square or circular, but do not make it long and rectangular. So I do not want to see things that would be long and rectangular right now, because then we have to do some more stuff to our code, because our collisions are based on circles at the moment. So our intersect function is looking for 2 circles. It's not looking for a rectangle. We can get by with using a square with our circle collision or intersection information, but it doesn't work with a rectangle.